welcome to Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingston, Texas, USA, with another episode of the Wow and How of Hebrew with our dear friend, Gavriel Sanders. And this is Privacy Unlisted in the Future Republic. Now everybody will get the note. Very good, very good. Here. So I was distracted by checking YouTube. I'm getting in the good habit of doing that. And thankfully, because from random times, I don't know what causes it, but YouTube will sometimes switch the privacy setting on my live streaming channel. It glitches, I guess. Most of the time it stays on public, and sometimes it'll come up as private, sometimes it'll be unlisted. And I just looked, and it was unlisted, so it's at public now. So it's wide open. Very good. My dear friend and brother.
We're in the public spaces now?
We are. We are in the public spaces, yes.
That's great.
Good news is it's always on Facebook because Facebook doesn't have any proxy settings like that to worry about, so that's okay. So very good. So it's a pleasure to have you back here. And just right off the bat, if I'm not mistaken, I won't see you next week. Is that correct?
I think you will not see me next week unless I send you a picture or a video.
Oh, right.
So gotcha. I could certainly do that. I could, take my little phone and send you a little, hi, William. So,
okay.
But
sounds
yes,
good.
Next week, no, but the week after that, we'll have something. And so,
great.
At any rate, I appreciate everyone's flexibility, by the way, about the sometimes uneven nature of our programming.
Right.
Part of it is just life. I am just really crazy busy. I was up this morning at 4:30. I'd love to say, communing with the Creator and having wonderful, blissful spiritual experiences. But I was actually, I taught 3 classes today, had 2 department meetings, and wrote a 9-page document about the future of our Hebrew department. And so that's why I was up at 4:30. So
wow.
not things I expected to be doing at this time of life, but you know what? It's all good because it's all God.
Hey, I like that.
That's right. You give us 24 hours, we'll give you the kingdom. Right.
There you go.
So
that's perfect.
a few things we're going to talk about this evening, and I appreciate, by the way, I have to really thank the people that so graciously reached out to me this last week. I got some great feedback.
That's awesome.
From what I thought was kind of a casserole of a program last week. In Yiddish, we have a word called cholent. Cholent is this gastronomically delightful dish that we eat on the Sabbath because in the old days, there were community ovens, which they would, kind of keep warm, and everybody put their cholent pot, their casserole pot there, and then so you could have hot food on the Sabbath. Because one of the things that the Sabbath is supposed to have within it is, the book of Isaiah, Sefer Yeshayahu says, if you call the Sabbath a delight, and he uses the word oneg. And so, eating like the Karaites, the Karaites sit around in darkness and eat cold food. That's their approach. So I've heard anyway. I've never been to a Karaite home. They and the Sadducees have something very much in common because they're very sad.
You see.
Old church joke from going way back. They weren't very fair, either. Okay, I see. Not fair.
That's
sorry about all that. It's been a long day. And so.
Hey, anything I can do to help you unplug, you just go right ahead.
Yeah, listen. This is like so therapeutic.
Very nice.
I should pay you $175 an hour just for the privilege of having this kind of video therapy going on here from Kingland. You know what? I always mess it up. It's with an S, right? Kingsland.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, because you're the king of Kingsland. Right. Okay. Good. I get it. Okay.
Oh, that's funny.
You
know what they say in the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king.
That's correct. Okay. Well, I have looked at Kingsland, Texas, from the standpoint of Google Earth, and it's a nice little town. You've got some water there and some pretty homes.
Yeah, and it's feast or famine. You have areas. Well, it's not really feast or famine. There's the middle, and that's kind of where we're at. But they've got really, really, really expensive lake houses and very wealthy people here.
So that.
But then 2 miles over here, it's like dirt roads and really like falling apart mobile homes and this really poor community. And so it's not really feast or famine. It's really just covered from the full spectrum. This here is probably a better way of saying that. From the poorest of the poor to very wealthy, all in this small little town. It's really, really strange. So.
Well, I tell you, that sounds a bit like I grew up back in the day. We was in the trailer park for a while when I was a boy.
We was too. My whole childhood, we were in that Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just for fun. I remember when the skeeter truck went spraying around for mosquitoes. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
I used to ride my bicycle behind the skeeter truck. As the
Oh,
fog kept coming out.
That's
So
funny.
that's terribly dangerous. Here I am.
Yes.
He's fogging for mosquitoes, and I'm in this fog on my bicycle trying to keep up with her. My mother flipped out. So she said,
Yeah, she should.
if it kills bugs, what can it do to you?
Right.
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
funny.
she told me stop bugging her. So all right, enough of that.
That's funny. Okay.
A few things. I've got, I'm scattered around several different things here that I want to bring to people's attention.
Okay.
One of the challenges of any kind of a program like this is that you have such a range of proficiency levels when it comes to language. We have people on board that are just struggling to master the Hebrew alphabet and the vowel points and get down a few basic words. And then we have people who have a facility to read. They don't always necessarily understand what they're reading, but they can at least sound the words out. And if they were you to give them one of the prayers or something to work through, or a passage from Tanakh, they could work their way through it and articulate it, hopefully with the correct emphasis on the right syllable, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are others who already have developed some proficiency and maybe have 500, 1,000 words. I see your hand there in front of my face.
I'm going to try to put the camera.
That's really funny on my
I'm
side.
I'm going to put it over next to where I'm
it's
looking.
Like this massive hand reaching out.
That's funny.
No, I won't do it again.
I had to put it over here in front of my face so it looks like I'm looking at you whenever you're looking at your screen.
Okay, very good. And I heard from someone up in Wenatchee, Washington. Isn't it amazing? You have viewers from Wenatchee, Washington. Give a shout out to Wenatchee.
Nice.
Up by the Columbia Gorge. I picked apples there when I was 16, 17 years old at BB Orchards there down on that's BB is not Netanyahu. This is BEEBE Orchards. So at any rate, we have this range of proficiency levels that we're talking about here. So I like to try to find various resources that I can then showcase through the vehicle of this program to then help people find their own way and their own level at whatever altitude they happen to be flying at right now. Then we can place things in front of them that help them to, go up to the next cleared level. And so a couple things that I found along the way, and a lot of it's based on things that I found helpful through the years, or I'm using now in my teaching of Hebrew, because that's really my first and foremost occupation as far as how I thank God make my living, which is, by the way, just such a mind blower to me. I started learning Hebrew when I was 24. I had a little bit of it in Bible college. Could look at the Strong's Concordance and the Chaldee part of it, they called it, which is really Hebrew, because Chaldean is really Aramaic, But so, at any rate, they called it Chaldean, and so I could sound out the words or whatever, but never could figure it out. And now today, Baruch Hashem, I can, I go to shul and the synagogue and pick up my siddur, and it's all in Hebrew, and I can not only read it and say it properly, but really understand it. Same thing now with in reading Chumash, or the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, to be able to sit down and look at the text as it is. And we're just finishing this week. This is the week of Parshat Vayichi, which is the end of the book of Genesis. Very sad and somber in the sense of Jacob's life. And as things are closing out, we're about to hit a transition going from the time of prosperity that the Bnei Yisrael had in Goshen to their ultimate enslavement as we migrate into the week after this into the book of Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus. So one of the things I wanted to mention as a helpful tool, if you know how to read Hebrew, and you can sound, by that I mean you know the letters, you can sound out things, and you want to spend some time getting acquainted more with, like, say the prayers, then my heartfelt recommendation to you is to pick up one of these, which is the Schottenstein Interlinear Siddur. And Siddur basically means arrangement. So when we at Passover, we make a Seder, which means order, and a Siddur is an ordered arrangement of the prayers. If you know the word Beseder, when someone says, "How are you?" and you say Beseder, everything's in order. Then everything in Jewish life there's a lot of detail to arrangement of things.
Right.
The book of Jewish law is called the book of Jewish law is called the Shulchan Aruch, which means the ordered table. So at any rate, I wanted to bring this the inside of this to your attention so you can just kind of see how is this Siddur put together. So some of you may have seen this before. It's available from ArtScroll. They have various versions of they have various interlinear texts. That's the best way to say it. They have some that are for holidays, it's called a machzor, from the word return, because these are holidays that return. So the machzor is exactly this. A lot of the same prayers are inside, or variations of. This is one from the book of Psalms. You can see it here. It's called Ashrei.
Right.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha. And you can just read the Hebrew, and then right underneath you've got the English, which in most cases it's pretty accurate. I mean, sometimes the translation is an interpretation, so it may not be one-to-one correspondence between the Hebrew word and the English word, but pretty close most of the time. Here's Shema, which everybody knows.
Right.
And so just by reading it and looking at it and going back and by virtue of repetition, you can get that. And then along with the Siddur, what's true for the Siddur has also been true. I remember when I was working in art school when this came out, we were very, very happy. In fact, I'll even turn to this week's Parsha, by Yigash. Here we go. Right. And so there it is, right here. You should be able to see this.
Oh yes.
There you go.
Yep.
All right. So this is the last portion of the Torah that we study in the book of Genesis. Okay, so you can see here the text with the English below. This is the Aramaic kind of commentary or adaptation of the Targum over there, Targum Onkelos, and then down below, of course, there's some Rashi here, and then some ArtScroll commentary. So it's well worth picking up. This, of course, it exists in 5 volumes, or you can even get it in a large single volume. That's, doubles as a weight for exercising, that one. It's so big. So just want to recommend these to people. Something else that just also came out fairly recently in the last couple of years, I think, is this, which is called the Hebrew Root Dictionary. This was actually done by a friend of mine. You can see his name there. Okay, so Rabbi Kotkin. It reminds me a little bit. It's it's done alphabetically. It reminds me a little bit of kind of how the Strong's Concordance treats words, because they'll give you a word, and then they've given all these different various ways the word is used. And the downside of that is that context is everything. A text without a context is a pretext, as I was taught in my hermeneutics class back in Bible college. And for those of you that don't know what hermeneutics is, it's not a 60s rock group. That was Herman and the Hermits. But he's done a really great job of kind of capturing all the various roots, major roots that are used throughout the Jewish Bible. This is a book that's really available more for someone that's a bit more scholarly, but you might want to have this as a reference to have a quick and easy look. And plus he gives a lot of the passages where the particular term is used in various styles. So when I'm looking at a word like where the word nephesh might be applied to the framework context of rest versus breath versus individual, these are nicely put together here. He spent a lot of time on, did a great job. So those are some just kind of reference works that I wanted to bring to your attention. And then you and I were talking earlier in preparation for the conversation this afternoon about Jeremiah 31.
Oh, yeah, right.
And I can say that any correspondence that I've had with well-meaning Messianics or missionaries, having certainly been the latter myself, and being very, I used to call myself I called myself a Christian Zionist, and I called myself a Messianic Gentile, that I'd been made one in Messiah with my Jewish brethren as well, according to Ephesians and other Pauline texts. And I believed very strongly that, according to the book of Hebrews, that echoing the words in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34, that God was giving the world a new covenant, right? That's the Brit HaChadashah. Right. And I was in proxy correspondence through a friend of mine recently, and that came up. It was one of the first things that the fellow brought up. I mean, there's certain basic things. I did this too as a missionary in Israel. One of the first things I would say to an Israeli, if I could buttonhole them long enough to talk to me, is to say, "Ta makir ta Tanakh shelcha?" Do you know your Bible? And in many cases, they knew certain portions, but the ones that I had deemed and been taught were Messianic, like Isaiah 53 and Zechariah 12, etc., Isaiah 9, Genesis 3:15. These they didn't know. They just weren't part and parcel of the schema of Jewish thought. So when I came to Jeremiah 31, I said, look, your own Bible says that the day is coming when God's going to say to the house of Israel and the house of Judah that I'm going to create a new covenant. He's going to do a Brit Chadashah. And I would have a version of the Bible that said, in fact, the Israel Bible Society, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the Israel Bible Society, not a Jewish group in Israel, actually put out what we called the whole Bible. It was Tanakh, with, of course, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim, and the Brit Chadashah. My first Hebrew language program, which is known as an Ulpan, in secular atheistic kibbutz Ein Dor, which is where I got started with Hebrew, and I was kicked out of that kibbutz for missionary activity, as a matter of fact, after 5 weeks. It's a long story in itself, many, many years ago. But it's really what launched much of my way, got me to where I am today, was the experiences at kibbutz Ein Dor. And they had these Bibles sitting right there on the shelf in the Ulpan. And none of these kids that I was studying with were necessarily interested, except the one girl from New York that asked me one day, said, no, excuse me, not from New York, she was from LA. And she said, is this the whole Bible? And I looked at it and it said, Brit Chadashah. I said, yes, as a matter of fact. And of course, that went to a long story of how she asked lots of questions and wanted to know about Messiah. And I sat with her and all with them with some other believers one night and, quote, led her to faith. And Caroline went from being just a plain vanilla lox and bagels Jew to being a Messianic Jew, a completed Jew, a fulfilled Jew, which is what, that's the language, that's the nomenclature that I used to use. So Jeremiah 31, 30 verses 31 through 34, which are echoed again in the book of Hebrews, are very pivotal and very key when it comes to any Christian, whether they're Jewish or not, and whether they're, quote, Jewish believer in Jesus or not. It's one of the first things that you talk about, because it's a substantiation and a validation in their minds, it certainly was in my mind previously, that this book we have of 27 additional books to the 39 of the Jewish Bible, that these are for real, and that it's God-breathed. And I remember someone asked me once, it's a very odd question, they said, do you believe that the text, Paul's letter to Philemon, has the same level of inspiration as the Ten Commandments? Now, that's an interesting question. So as a Christian at that time, I had to answer, well, for sure, because all Scripture is God-breathed. The Greek word theopneustos, I think, is what the word, if I remember correctly, from the word theos, God, and pneuma. So I believed definitely that the entire New Testament was God-breathed, just as the entire Old Testament, as I called it, was God-breathed. So going back to Jeremiah 31, there are lots of different people involved in, responding to missionaries have treated this text. And I've heard it from Rabbi Kravitz, and I've heard it from Rabbi Skobac, and I've heard it from Rabbi Singer and others, Rabbi Shulman, whom you've had on the program for a number of different presentations. Everyone talks about this, but one thing that I didn't hear so much, and it's so simple and subtle that it just sort of slips past us. Does the word covenant, well, what does this word brit mean? At my synagogue right down the street, within walking distance, actually I have about 10 synagogues within walking distance of my house. It's amazing, on Shabbat morning or Friday night, see all the Jews in the street. And now, because of security lately on Shabbat mornings, we have streets that are blocked off. We have, They look like police cars. They're community service cars, but they're with lights on top. And I should mention just briefly, to people out there who do pray, that we've had a rough last month or so here in New York.
Right.
The major events you've heard about, like what happened in Muncie with the machete-wielding guy, and then what happened in Jersey City with the killing at the kosher grocery store. But we're having events. I mean, things happened yet this morning. We had a case of we have a mixed neighborhood here where we are, and someone tried to trip a young Jewish girl walking down the street. And somebody saw it from a window and said, "Hey, why'd you do that?" And she said, "Well, she's Jewish, isn't she?"
Wow.
This is unbelievable. We had someone try and break in during school day last week into one of the yeshivas here, and he caused a bit of a ruckus. But thank God nothing happened. But everybody's very hypervigilant right now. Security's up all the way around. So this is, now. I'm just wondering if I should go down this road. Remind me to come back to this thought after I finish Jeremiah 39, because after I finish Jeremiah 31.
Okay.
Because there's something I want to address. It just came to my mind. I did a video on it earlier this week, put it out to my particular network in the Jewish community. But on Jeremiah 31, the question is, what does the word brit mean? That word brit, when Hashem says, "I'm going to establish a new brit chadasha," what does that mean?
Right.
Well, it's translated covenant. And if we look at, I'm going to come over here to one of several dictionaries I have, this little bitty one that I have here. And by the way,
I thought that was the handbook on how to understand women at first.
Well, in my old days, I would have said, "This is the handbook on how to understand women."
There's no.
That was my old way of thinking. It's not my way of thinking now, because But the word brit basically means a covenant. We know that, but it means like an agreement, a treaty. That would be fair. It's used in other contexts and sometimes combined with other words like brit milah, which means circumcision. That's what it's called that. So, bottom line, if you make a new covenant, does that mean that you're establishing a new law? That's the simple question. Does making a new covenant imply, demand, require a new law? And the answer to that question is no. Let's say, William, you and I set up some kind of contractual agreement to do something. We went into business together, or we're going to purchase a piece of property together, or anything requiring a legal document to formalize and stipulate the terms of our working relationship for the fulfillment of the outcome that we're looking for in that agreement. What do we base that agreement on? We embrace it in this country. We base it on tort law, right? This goes way back, as far as the legal system. But if that agreement doesn't work out, and we tear up that covenant, that agreement, do we have to revise the law in order to make another one?
I wouldn't think so.
No, that's exactly the right answer. You don't. So the implication, though, in the New Testament is that the law changed.
Right.
Again, going back to the book of Hebrews, it makes it pretty clear in the book of Hebrews that which is old, is vanishing. It's going away.
Right.
And what does it talk? What's old? What we're talking about? We're talking about now. As a Christian, I used to say, well, it's not the moral law; it's the ceremonial law. By the way, that's always baffled me, because when we talk about ceremonial law, we're talking about certain visible trimmings and trappings that you can see. And so to say to a Messianic, well, wait a minute, you're wearing a kippah. Where do you get that? You've got tzitzit on. Where do you get that? Some of them go so far as to put on tefillin. Okay, all right, I get or I remember when I went to a Messianic synagogue years ago in Toronto, and I walked in on this Shabbat morning, happened to also be Christmas Day, ironically, and here's this guy in a talit walking in, and he walks into the bathroom wearing the talit. I thought, listen, like,
oh wow,
he's not Jewish. I said, he's not Jewish. Should I tell him? What do I,
Wow.
So I didn't go there, but the bottom line was they've got all these appurtenances that are emblematic and characteristic of Jewish life, and yet these are the symbols that supposedly passed away, and yet they're taking on all these different symbols. Putting a mezuzah on the door, for example, lighting Hanukkah candles, because that's totally rabbinic. Okay, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah to light Hanukkah candles, right?
Yet they criticize Jewish people for following traditions.
Right.
And they do the same thing.
As if tradition is a four-letter word. And it's not. So, and they do what they do. I understood because I remember when these things started. See, that's one of the, I think, problems and benefits of being the age that I am now. I've watched this movement. First, I was part of it inside a long time ago, talking about, late 60s, early 70s, certainly the 80s. So I was part of that whole milieu. I knew the number of these personalities, and I remember Moshe Rosen and Joel Chernoff and from Lamb and other ministries that were very, very active. And we used to have Jews for Jesus come into my church once or twice a year to talk about Christ and the Passover and things like that. So I'm really, I think, reasonably informed on these things from an inside point of view. And my whole perspective today is, and I've heard Tovia Singer say this certainly more than once, it doesn't make any difference what I think or what you think or, so-called Messianic Rabbi so-and-so down the street thinks. What really makes the difference is simply what does the Word of God say to us? How can we clearly understand what's in here? And to get to that, we have to go to the Hebrew. And the Hebrew makes it very clear that there's Torah, which means law, and it also means instruction. And there's covenant, and they're two different things. So bringing in a new covenant is not a bringing out of the old law. That's really how I want to summarize this little discussion that we're having here. And I brought this up to missionaries as well, and many times they say that they just don't have a good answer for it. Then if you fast forward in the text of Jeremiah 31 to verse 34, and it talks about, of course, the famous one that everybody discusses, that neither will a man, say to his neighbor, know the Lord. You won't be teaching people to say, know the Lord, because they're all going to know me from the least to the greatest. Right. And that certainly has not happened. And by the way, that would be the visible sign of the new covenant, right?
Right. Yep.
So what's it say? He's going to do a work in the heart, all right? Write it on the heart. But can you see that? No, you can't see that. It's like when I've heard Rabbi Singer talk about the virgin birth, and it's supposed to be a sign. Yeah. But you can't tell. Nobody had a gynecologist certificate of validating the virginity, and that's not going. What kind of a sign is that? It's not a sign unless you can see the sign. And of course, if we were to look out the window or just have this knowledge that all the world is aware of the Creator at a conscious, active level. Well, that's something tangible, measurable, palpable, shared by everyone. These other things are very subjective and very elusive. So anyway, that's all I want to say about that. Okay. In terms of the clarification of what I think has been an often murky text. So I'll say it again for the benefit of any Christians that are watching, and please know that my attitude towards you, our attitude here at this channel, is in nowhere antagonistic. We've all been kind of where you are, but it's highly likely that you've not been where we are, exactly. On the other side of a process of really thinking it through, right. And coming to realizations that, I kind of call it the emperor's new clothes phase of my life. Right. To go, oh my gosh, this whole faith system that I thought was the king of everything is really naked and devoid of substance. So, and people say to me, for example, well, what about progressive revelation? And I was thinking, it's odd, this came back into my head recently from just once in a while, New Testament passages. I haven't read the New Testament in many, many years, just to now make a study of it. Once in a while I poke around just to refresh myself on something, but that's a different issue. But it's been in my head lately of John chapter 10 that says that where the Christian God says that he has to go away. Oh yeah, but and if he doesn't, because it doesn't go away, because he wants the Comforter to come, the Comforter, which is referred to as the Holy Spirit. And excuse me. And what is the job description in John 10 of the Comforter? What's he supposed to do? He's supposed to lead you into all truth. Am I saying that correctly? Do you remember that as well?
That's exactly right. Yep.
Right, to lead you into all truth.
Yep. I'm gonna look at it just to be.
Okay, so when I look at Christian history, the church history, and I see how quickly this thing derailed There was the Jewish church that died out, whether they were the Ebionites, the Evionim, or somehow connected to the Qumran community, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. But the fact that the Jewish Christian church died out, and then off we go with the Catholic Church, and we see where it went. And then there's the Ante-Nicene fathers who had all kinds of crazy doctrines and ideas going on, where there was Marcionism, and there was, excuse me, and there was the whole Gnostic influence that was happening at that time. I mean, there was all kinds of divisions. He's man, he's God, he's half man, he's half God. All these different arguments are going on. So where's this truth that you're being led into, right? So where's this sense of consistency and continuity and the paper trail to substantiate? It's not there. It's just really, really not there. So these are some of the things that I wrestled with through the years, and finally came to my own conclusion that, you know what? If it's true, it's not new. What's new isn't true, and what's true isn't new.
Right.
That's the way we say it. So, any comments, anything in there that you wanted to jump on?
No, I'm actually looking at that. Would you say it was in John 10?
I believe it's John 10.
I might have to look that up. Of course, it's like 40-something verses in there, so I'm still looking for that one. But actually, I'm pretty sure that's what it says. So it's kind of
well, if you just put in your, it's amazing what you can do today. Put in your browser, Comforter come, and it'll probably just pop right out.
Yeah,
but while you're doing that, I wanted to come back to the subject that we're talking about relative to the events taking place in Greater New York and other parts of the country. This spike, I guess we should call it, of anti-Semitism.
Okay.
Historically, and I taught modern Jewish history at the high school where I am for I guess 2 years at least, in recent years. And for me, modern Jewish history, I date that from a little earlier than some people do. I go back to 1450 and Gutenberg Press, with the invention and proliferation of the printing press, because that was really the kind of the equivalent of an information age explosion that took place. Prior to that time, books took months to create, and they were done painstakingly by hand on vellum, and it was anybody that had books was usually a wealthy person. Scholars had to travel from city to city to go visit a book. Can you imagine that? Imagine if you wanted to get a certain book and it's not in this library in this town, you have to go over here halfway across the country, or to another country altogether to study a book.
Right.
So the printing press, shortened the distance between ignorance and knowledge, for sure. So down through modern Jewish history, we see a lot of phases of anti-Semitism. The end of the 15th century, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But right at the same time, what happened? Ferdinand and Isabella expelled all the Jews from Spain. And a lot of them went to Portugal. They were there for 5 years, and then they got expelled from Portugal. And some went further to the west, to the east, and some went north, Amsterdam, etc. Many went to Poland, and there was a period of about 150 years in Poland of relative tranquility and rebuilding and acquiring lands or becoming managers of lands. And then all of a sudden, 1648 and 49, the Chelmenichi massacres, that probably up to 300,000 Jews were killed. And then along comes Shabtai Tzvi, the false messiah, who led astray about a third of Jewry, with his sidekick known as Nathan or Natan of Gaza, saying he was like John the Baptist, saying, "Yeah, he's really the Messiah. He's really the Messiah." Right. And the consequences down through the Enlightenment, Jews throwing off Jewish identity or saying be a man in the street and a Jew at home, the wanting to be part of the common culture. And then when they became part of the common culture, the people said, look, they've become like us, but they've taken over the banks and the educational systems, they own all the property. And once again, we're seeing common themes that we've heard in various eras coming back again. Just this week, we've heard it. There's a commentator, an interviewing commentator named Ami Horowitz, who goes around interviewing people about their ideas and then puts them together and just lets the people speak for themselves. And often they're very inane and insane ideas that people have of their views. And he did one on here in New York about what certain people in the community, specifically thinks of what's happening. And the bottom line was, well, the Jews kind of, they're asking for it because they own all the property, they own all the real estate, and they're not giving it back to us. And so, well, that's just can't. That's how people feel. So, and I'm not anti-Semitic, but, and of course, anytime you hear that statement, you know something anti-Semitic is coming. So, anyway, why am I saying all this? People are asking themselves left and right, what do we do? And my simple, humble view of this is when the children of Israel cried out to God, when they were threatened with a real physical enemy, they turned to a real spiritual solution. It's interesting, the word Yeshua, or Yeshua, it's not the people say it's Jesus' name. The word Yeshua, if you go back and trace it historically, means deliverance from a physical enemy. Amazing, right? Because you go back and look at not just the etymology of the word, but look at the context in which the word Yeshua has been, been used. And you will see oftentimes the context is deliverance from threatening, real, physical, three-dimensional human enemies. And the right approach to this is to up our spiritual wattage, our amplitude, to tune into a higher wavelength, if you will, of spiritual. Again, I'll use the same word, amplitude. How do we do that? What do we do? Well, of course, obviously, there's tefillah, there's prayer. The being more conscious of fact, talking to Hashem throughout the day, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, just to be sure to consciously include a running dialogue with the creator of the world in whatever it is we're doing. Otherwise, we're living a bifurcated, split existence as if he's not really there. We call out when we really need him. But the truth is, we need him for every breath, like the song by Sting, every breath I take,
yep, right.
Every breath you take. Another thing is to focus on some particular act of giving, for example, charitable giving. And I don't mean to exploit a moment, but I'm going to exploit a moment. If you could find, I'm saying this to the viewers, if you could find in your heart to give $5, $10 a month to help support the work that William's doing here. He's done a lot of this funding of this, all this equipment, the technology. None of us who are presenting on the platform of Tanakh Talk are compensated for that. We do this because of love. We love God and we love you. And so but there is some support that needs to happen. That's a charitable expression that you could do through PayPal or through the site. Just a little something that just ups the level of bringing more goodness into the world. Because the death that happened in New Jersey and the attempted massacre that was attempted that happened in Muncie, New York. What is the Torah's answer to death? What's the opposite of death? Life. And the Torah specifically says, William, that uvachata b'chaim. We would translate that as choose life, an imperative, choose life. Well, what does it mean, choose life? Okay, choosing to live today. What next? Now what do I do? I made the choice. No. It has to do with choosing life-begetting activities. In my thoughts, in my words, in the deeds of my hand, the path and direction of my feet, how I interact with other people, the attitudes that I allow to sit in my heart, how I feel when I encounter people that are difficult, and what I allow to come out of my mouth, and what the concepts I allow to congeal in my mind. Those are life-begetting or life-canceling activities. So uvacharta b'chaim involves ourselves living intentionally and consciously. So whether it's me going later to the synagogue tonight for the evening prayer called Ma'ariv, and instead of just kind of, kind of by rote,
nice voice, by the way,
to inject conscious intent into what I'm doing. If it's making a bracha, as we do in Jewish life, we say all kinds of blessings for all manner of things, from seeing a rainbow to a flight over a desert, or being rescued from a difficult situation, a flight over water like a sea, over foods. There's so many different blessings that are part and parcel of Jewish living, because we want to keep being reminded of the fact that there's a creator. I'm not just consuming this food for myself, for example. Before I bite this apple, I want to say a special thank you to the one who created the apple. It wasn't just the orchard guy in Washington that grew it. It's people say, We can count the number of seeds in an apple, but only Hashem knows the number of apples in a simple seed, right? Or trees inside of a seed. There was a very famous rabbi named Rabbi Miller, who everybody in our community certainly knew who he was, wrote a lot of books, and he passed away about almost 20 years ago. And Rabbi Miller used to carry, I think it was orange seeds, a few orange seeds in his pocket, because he always wanted to contemplate the wonders of the Borei Olam, of the Creator. So, I mean, that's something you could do. Next time you have an orange, just take some of the seeds, clean them up, maybe put them in a plastic bag. Why would you do that? Because you want to up your consciousness. So the answer, it's not the only answer. Yes, there's education we need to do. We had 25,000 people that walked across the Brooklyn Bridge yesterday in a protest and solidarity to say, no hate, no fear. Those are all good episodic things to do. But when it comes down to the ongoing linear living that we have to do from day to day, moment to moment, how do we include the Creator in that? Well, these are little things, these little ideas I'm giving you to become more conscious of higher level, higher powered living. That's really what I'm talking about. So part of our collective response is to live better, to live differently, to live higher than what we see happening by those who choose to be agents or brokers of hate or fear. And we all are concerned about the nature of the days in which we live. And those of us who grew up on apocalyptic kinds of thinking, for example, it's like, wow. And even in Jewish apocalyptic thinking, the whole issue of what's happening with Iran right now, that's concerning, but we believe Mashiach is coming. We believe that in every generation there's somebody who could qualify to be Mashiach, if the generation is worthy. And we may be there. There's never been more Torah studied at any time in history than today. Right. That's a powerful thing. So just, upping your learning of God's holy word, saying a few more Psalms every day, or saying Psalms at all each day, reading a chapter of the book of Proverbs every day. There's just such an endless list that we could create that are representations of this choosing of life. So I'll invite each of you that are watching now to join me. Now, for me, one of the things I've decided to do is there's a whole body of Jewish teaching called Musar or Musar. Have you ever heard that term?
I have. Yes, sir.
So Musar is basically ethical teachings. It's the moral teachings about how to create a solid, honest inner life of integrity. And there are many different authors of that going. I mean, if you take a look at the tiny little Talmudic tractate that you'll find in every Sabbath Siddur prayer book, it's called The Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot. That's a fascinating one to study. It's just 6 short chapters and contains some of the greatest themes mentioned in Judaism. You'll find that there. So to study things like that, or other ethical works that have to do with being just simply being a better person, being a mensch is what we call it in Yiddish, just to be a mensch, to be a better person. This is one of the right responses, not the only response, but it's definitely a right response that everyone can engage in. Not everybody can walk across the Brooklyn Bridge yesterday, but we can. I mean, we can all write to our representatives, etc. Those are all things that need to be done. But again, those are episodic things. What do we do in the continuum? And what we do in the continuum is we want to increase our connection to life. To life, to life. L'chaim.
You get a great voice, by the way.
So we go back to Tovia, and so.
I don't know if you're ignoring me or you just didn't hear me.
I didn't hear you. I heard you sing.
I said you have a great voice, by the way.
Well, I think I used to.
I think you still do.
It's changed a bit as time has gone on, but thank God I'm grateful. I get called upon to do at least narrations and so forth, but voiceovers. But I used to sing. I was part of a few bands, Christian and otherwise, cool. back in the day. And there was some of the older people that might watch this channel will remember some big musicals that were done back in the 70s, like Come Together, If My People. I was part of that whole scene with Pat Boone and others. These guys are all now in their 80s. So I'm laughing because I grew up at the time we said don't trust anybody over 30, and all those people who didn't trust anybody over 30 are now over 60.
That's funny.
And all the long hairs have become no hairs or short hairs, So.
Oh man, that's funny. Wow.
So how would you summarize today's discussion? And by the way, is there anyone if you I don't know if you're monitoring the chat window at all, if anybody has anything they want to weigh in on here in terms of a comment that you think is relevant to our discussion today.
Okay, I'm looking, and again, I always look for flags when people flag Tanakh Talk. It shows up in bright orange, so I can see it. And it takes about a second and a half to scan the entire chat blog. And without that, I've got to look for questions, and I don't see the flag. So, yeah, I don't see any flags with questions or anything. So if you got a question, you can put it in right now. And if you just put the @ symbol and then Tanakh Talk and put your question in, and I'll certainly bring it up on the air, right? See, yep, I don't see anything right now. So, oh, there we go. Hold on. I don't. Oh, Deanna, she says, hi, Tanakh Talk. I don't really see any questions. Thank you for scanning that for me, Deanna, my chief admin for all of Tanakh Talk. Thank you so much.
We give a shout out to Deanna for her keeping an eye on the quality of the chat room there. So
Paul Brill has a question, as a general question. It's not a Hebrew question, but because we were discussing Jeremiah 31:31 and the New Covenant, I think his question is probably fitting. The question is, how do we know who the Messiah will be?
That's a great question. I think I recognize Paul's name from previous programs.
Nice.
And times when I was able to hang out in the chat room. Messiah will do some very specific things. Now, there's at least 6, and you can look this up. It's available on the TORAH website. It's available on the Jews for Judaism website. Rabbi Michael Skobac has done, and as well as his administrator in Canada, Julius Sis, a former Jews for Jesus missionary. They've all talked about this specific subject. And I think with Julius, if you look up his last name is CISS. So if you look up Julius Sis Messiah, I believe there's a video on YouTube that discusses this. And it goes about 6 or 7 minutes. But he goes through the very 6 major, there are some minor things, but major things that we expect Messiah to do. Excuse me. First of all, we know that he'll be I'm not going to go through all 6 because I've just given you a reference where you can find it and go into more depth, but some of them are. We know that one of the characteristics of the Messianic Age will be that, and it shows up there in Jeremiah, chapter 31, verse 34, that all the world basically will know God. And that's echoed in Isaiah chapter 2 and Isaiah chapter 11. We find this same echo there and in other parts of Tanakh, that the knowledge of God is going to cover the earth like the waters cover the sea. And whether it's like I don't know if it's an overnight thing that happens or if it's a slow dawning, whichever way it's going to take place, I do believe that the world events are bringing us to a new consciousness. I look at a number of side issues sociologically and scientifically. And for example, I'm personally interested in quantum physics for spiritual reasons. And I see that there's a real shift away from the deterministic, mechanistic, the old scientific model of if it's only real if you can measure it. So Messianic Age is going to have a very different consciousness to it. Secondly, some of the things that I've heard, I think Rabbi Skobac has said, that you can look out the window, the rebuilding of the temple, that the third temple has to be there. The very end, the whole last few chapters of the book of Ezekiel speak about that particular era. So Messiah is going to bring that about. And he's going to regather the Jews from around the world. The great ingathering was called the Kibbutz Galiot. There's actually kibbutz in Israel called Galiot, as a matter of fact. But Kibbutz Galiot means gathering of the dispersed, the exiles. And so, again, whether that's happening slowly or there's going to be this rapid kind of thing like we saw when a lot of the Russian Jews came, in short time. But we see today a lot of Jews coming back. There's almost half the world's Jews live in Israel today, as a matter of fact. So these are things that are emblematic of Messiah being here. Now, I don't know what Paul Brill's posture is spiritually, but I used to say you can't have peace among men until you have peace in the human heart, and that Jesus, the Messiah, came to bring about this peace in the heart. Of course, the obvious frustrating contradiction to all of that is to see all of the, and I know people bring this up like almost an atheist's arguments against spirituality, but when you see the wholesale church-sponsored slaughter of Jews and other minorities and even other types of Christians, that this from ignorance. I go back to that whole thing I said earlier about from John chapter 10. Did you find that, by the way, about the comforter?
No, I'll go ahead and look it up, though. Go ahead and keep talking.
Okay.
I'll check it out for you.
Okay. The one thing's for sure. If Messiah is supposed to regather the Jewish people and rebuild the temple, then 40 years after at least the alleged time of Jesus' crucifixion, the temple disappears, right? 70 AD. The Jews are dispersed. The Romans conquered 135 after the Bar Kokhba revolt, 135 CE, and Jews can't even come into Jerusalem anymore. No Jews are allowed. They renamed the city Elioli Capitolina, and Jews were persona non grata in their own land. And so for 2,000 years of this dispersion up until, in the last 100 years or so, and then with the reestablishing of the modern state of Israel in 1948. All these things people know. Again, are these harbingers, precursors? I definitely think they can be. The truth is, though, when Messiah arrives, everybody's going to know it. So the idea that somehow, if I don't come to believe in Jesus now, I'm going to miss out is simply not true.
Right.
But again, I can say I'm safe to Paul and the state others. Please go look up what Julius has talked about on this in 6 or 7 minutes, and he's got citations, texts, and he's got it's a lot of references there, and also look at what Rabbi Skobac had to say about it.
So John 14:16.
Oh, is that where it is?
Yes, sir.
Oh, see, it's been a while since I've read it. It's not
okay.
John 10 at all.
Well, you got the right letter. So,
well, John 10 is about the shepherd, so that's right.
Yeah, it's interesting here. It says, if you shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. That is, in my opinion, the biggest lie of the New Testament I've ever experienced in my life, start to finish. Even as a Christian, that was never the case. Every once in a while, I felt like a prayer was answered, but this says, anything you ask in my name, I will do it.
Yeah, I'm quiet because I'm identifying with what you're saying. I went through exactly the same thing about that particular text.
Right.
It's true that once in a while things would happen. I remember somebody saying once that, prayer is just coincidence. And the rejoinder to that was, well, it's a funny thing you say that, because the more I pray, the more coincidences I have, and the less I pray, the fewer coincidences I have. So there is something to be said for, and this is true of any person of faith. A person of faith sees the hand of providence more than a person who doesn't. All right. So, and I don't care what major or minor faith system you might be in. Belief is better. Some belief is better than no belief. Sure. But anyway, you found it in John 14. Okay, so I apologize to all those people who were sitting out there shouting at the screen at me earlier saying, no, Sanders, it's 14, not 10. As I said, it's been a while since I've read it, and I just proved it. So
hey, and just a confirmation, too, for the whole idea of the prayer, and, Jesus said, I will do it for you. I've had unbelievable ratio of more answered prayers after I left Christianity than while I was in it. So,
really?
I'm dead serious. It's amazing. I can't even begin to know where to start. It's just been borderline. You would think it was something off the X-Files, how crazy it is, but in a good way. So yeah.
Well, we see the very fact that you're sitting where you are right now, with the blessing of the technology that you have been able to cobble together for the good of all of us that share the blessing and the benefit of this channel, I think it's just amazing. And so again, I make an appeal to people to help out, to once in a while or on a monthly basis, that this is an important entity that's giving some light, focused direction, comfort, guidance, community, fellowship. I mean, a lot of nouns and adjectives I can throw in here. Sure. To say that this is a virtual community, and you way down there in Kingsland, Texas, have been a catalyst for a lot of people's journeys. Right. And what's interesting to me is when I look at the the program lineup of people that you've been able to, like a lightning rod, attract to be part of this joint venture, the spiritual enterprise of saying, okay, people are coming out of the church, they're asking questions about Noahidism, they're asking questions about what about Judaism, or how do I relate to God? Now I'm out of the church, but I still believe in God, and what do I do? And what's protocols in my life? What events can I celebrate? What food should I eat, not eat? What holidays? I get the mystery of those questions and the conundrum that awaits many people when they've exited the church.
Right. Very good. Well, Gavriel, you're such an awesome dude. And I really appreciate what you're doing here for us, helping us to get a better understanding of the Hebrew language, and just a huge blessing to me, especially because it's really, having the show really helps me, ignites me more to want to learn, to dig in more, and to learn better. And I will tell you something, a neat little learning tool that my friend Lon Cherry Holmes told me a long time ago. He said if you really want to learn Hebrew, he goes, before you even learn it, he goes, you should immerse yourself in it. And I didn't understand that. And he told me, he said, download an app for Israeli radio and just listen to them speak, like as long throughout the day as you can, to get familiar with these sound patterns and with these things. And he goes, then as you start to learn the words and start to learn how to pronounce words, that is going to like expedite your learning process, because you're already going to have a familiarity with it that you'd never had before. And I found it very, very interestingly true for me, because for about the past 5 years, I've been listening to, I've mentioned this on many shows, that Chabad.org is one of my favorite resources, to which I'm hoping one day Hashem would bless Tanakh Talk to be that kind of a resource to that scale and magnitude. But this one particular rabbi...
Amen.
Amen, thank you. So this one late rabbi, hope may his name be a blessing to all those who he touched. He is named Yehoshua Gordon, and the thing that I loved about his lesson is he reads it in Hebrew and then he translates it, and then he reads it and then translates it, and he reads it and translates it. And so even now I go back there just to learn biblical Hebrew, because he reads rather fast, but you start catching on to it. And since I already have a pretty large database of words already, it's easier for me to follow him. But that just the way he does it, like he'll read like a half of a sentence, and then he'll speak the English, and he'll read the other half. Sometimes he'll go a full verse and go back and repeat it in English. Absolutely priceless. I totally love that. That's so cool.
So I'm really glad that you said that, and with your permission, I'm going to ask you, because you just really set it up, like.
Okay.
Maybe it was one of those planned, unplanned segues.
Sure, go for it.
One of those little God incidences that we talked about earlier.
Yes.
I was actually going to mention that people who are really serious about learning Hebrew, but who are busy, like most of us, carve out as little as 10 minutes a day. Call it, in Hebrew, the word project is project.
Oh, wow.
And the number for 10, like 10 minutes, is eser.
Mm-hmm.
So project eser, making your own project eser, would be to carve out 10 minutes a day. And I'd like to show you. Do you have that link that I gave you earlier?
I sure do. Give me 1 second.
That we had, and that's fine. I'll talk about it. What I'm going to have William show you now is one of many videos that are available on YouTube. But it's called Hebrew Conversation for the Absolute Beginner. That's not exactly accurate, because it presumes that you have a certain baseline vocabulary, and it assumes that you're able to read without vowel points, and that's a big leap for a lot of people. I remember making that myself. But hitchhiking, what William talked about and what Lon mentioned to him, is that it's absolutely necessary that you have a phase of aural, it's AURAL, ear level, that audio, aural adjustment to the language. Just like we all did with the English language, or whatever your first language is, that you heard it for a long time before you ever uttered a word in it, and you understood it long before you could ever really articulate your own thoughts, needs, or interests in that language. Go get the ball. No, the red one. Bring it over here.
Right.
And you could do that as a child without necessarily you couldn't analyze the language, but you understood what was being asked of you. So you have to replicate that as part of your own second language acquisition. This is a big subject talked about by Dr. Stephen Krashen, former linguist from USC. He talks about this in his 5 hypotheses of language acquisition. He's like the guru of second language acquisition in the world today. And Dr. Krashen talks about this kind of silent phase that people have to go through. So I'm going to give you a tool that you can apply to 10 minutes. And it's about 20 different short conversations in Hebrew. You'll see the setup. I just want you to go through like from marker 23 seconds to 1 minute. And we'll see one cycle of that. But you have a dialogue, 2 people talking.
This video is only 14 and a half minutes long.
That's fine. Yeah, but that one that's 20. Yeah, we're only gonna look at 40 seconds.
Oh, 40 seconds. I thought you said minutes. I'm so sorry.
No, I want to go from 23 seconds in because that's a little commercial on the front.
I got you.
To 1 minute. I just want to set this up because the structure of these conversations is it's presented where you hear it and you'll see pictures or whatever. You're not going to see it's not animated per se, but you'll see images, static mostly. And you'll hear people talking about things.
Okay.
And then you'll hear it, but then you'll see the Hebrew text and the English underneath it. So here's the deal. What you want to do is master one dialogue really well. It's to the point where when you hear it, then without this, again, it's presented first without the subtexts, the subtitles, where you're able to anticipate and say, I know exactly what they're talking about. When you've mastered that first dialogue, then go on to the next dialogue. Each dialogue is about a minute or less long. So now you've got a project that you can do through let's say between now and June to master this vocabulary and to get it down, and it'll become part of you just by listening. You will internalize it. And so when you hear other words that show up in other subsequent dialogues, you'll recognize them. Or say, oh, that sounds familiar.
This is not going to play with the audio because actually I've got it on the same system that I've got your voice on, and there's one overrides the other. But they can see the link. It's View Pure.
Well, you know what? If they write me, because that's actually a filtered link.
Oh, okay. That could be a reason.
So that strips out the YouTube ads and other things like that. I use that in school where I want to just present the video itself. But
I got you. Okay.
Can you show it at all? Just because we could at least see it.
Yeah. I can. In fact, I've got it playing right now. It's 29 seconds. There's a car, a train, a boat, and a rhino on the screen right now. And I can't hear.
So they're talking.
So. Okay, now there's some words popped up with no Nikodot. Right. There's the Hebrew text and the English subtitles as well there. Right.
So you can figure out kind of where the dialogue is going.
Let's take a book off the shelf, or on that shelf. Yep.
Right. So this is basically a lady's walking into a bookstore and she wants to get a particular book about cars.
It would be nice if they actually had the Nikodot though, because that would be. Because it's going to be hard to pronounce it without it. Oh, they're actually pronouncing it, so you'll know how to pronounce it because they're actually saying it. Okay, never mind. Scratch that. Got it. That makes sense.
So this is one thing you could do. There's another resource on YouTube called Hebrew Pod 101, Hebrew POD 101. They have a lot of videos there that are free and useful to do. And another thing that you mentioned, that Lon mentioned, was just to listen a lot. I mean, I have tons and tons of resources like this that I recommend to my students to watch Israeli television series. There's one old ones that go way back that are very useful. And with YouTube, of course, you can bump the speed down to 0.75.
Right.
So without too much of a degradation in the voice quality, you can still enjoy, kind of slow the pick, because Israelis tend to speak rather quickly and mumble, but they say that about us too. So.
Right. Gotcha.
All right. I think we've stretched this rubber band as far as it wants to go here today. I want to thank you, William, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, too.
Here in chilly New York for your labor of love for all of us. I think everybody in the chat window there should give a shout out to say thank you to William and give him a big blessing for everything that he's doing. And again, if you're in a position to help out a little bit, please do that, because you can see there's lights burning right there. There's equipment in there that has to be upgraded. There's bandwidth to be paid for. And that makes you a bona fide and a card-carrying, contributing member of the Tanakh Talk family.
And I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to all the people out there who have been with me over this past week and a half with the passing of my father, and Deanna for what she's done with the fundraiser. It was unfortunate that I was incredibly ill during that time, and I had to take off 2 weeks worth of work, and I was like literally, I was completely incapacitated with the exception of doing the shows. So I tried to make sure we did the shows, and Deanna had did a little fundraiser to help me get through that economic burden, and people met it. I'm very, very, very thankful. So,
Baruch Hashem, brother.
So, thank you.
We're very sorry for the loss. Any of us who've lost a parent know about there's sort of a hole that appears in the ceiling of one's life, right, where that person's always been. And you and I have spoken of your father more than once, and he's in the world of truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And may that truly set him free. I'm sure there's some great realizations.
Indeed.
Happening right now. So, and ultimately that's all of our destination. We're all heading there. So this is the ethics of the fathers tell us that this world is simply a corridor,
right,
from one level of existence to another level of existence. So let's do it with love and care for each other.
Indeed.
And this is Sanders talking to you from New York, saying bracha v'atzlacha b'chol ma'asechem, which means blessing and success in all you do.
Thank you all, and thank you all for tuning in and subscribing. We'll see you guys. We won't see Gavriel next week unless it's strictly a photograph. So 2 weeks he'll be, but I'll try to put on an entry-level Hebrew with me, and if I can get somebody else to assist me on that, maybe, or else I'll just show you how much I don't know about Hebrew. So, anyway, love you guys, and love you, my dear friend. You guys are amazing. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. חושבים דוברים לובשים בכל האופנים, זה טבעם של אנשים שונים. נזכור בסוף כולנו שותפים, חשוב תמיד להיות אנושיים. חושבים דוברים לובשים בכל האופנים, זה טבעם של אנשים שונים. נזכור בסוף כולנו שותפים, חשוב תמיד להיות אנושיים. אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב